Bryson, can you give me an example of tolerance in history?
Okay. When the Japanese Americans during World War II were put into camps, but in the camps, unlike the Jewish camps, the working camps, they didn't work, but the Americans didn't kill them. So it was just like they were living their lives, unlike the Jews who were being killed and worked to death.
Mateo, can you give me an example of tolerance from history?
For example, Abraham Lincoln, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and that's how he had tolerance.
Okay, thank you. Seth, can you give me an example of tolerance in history in your opinion?
When the Jews were put in concentration camp, they didn't give up on life.
Okay, thanks. Will, can you give me an example of intolerance?
When the blacks and whites were fighting against who, like why blacks were treated unfair from whites.
What was that called?
Segregation.
Okay, thank you. What's an example of intolerance?
An example of intolerance is that men were only allowed to vote and not women during 1920 in the United States.
Okay, thanks. What's your example of intolerance?
Intolerance is that men in Greece were not allowed to vote if they did not own land.
Okay, thank you.
An example of tolerance is when Kevin knew the truth about who Freak was, and he thought that Freak was just needed a little bit of help and that he wasn't a butthead.
And what was that from?
Freak the Mighty.
Okay.
And an example of intolerance is when Rome was fighting with the other city-state about Spain of who gets what in their trading legacy.
I'm doing tolerance. My example was the slaves tolerated their masters when they were in cotton fields picking cotton.
I'm doing intolerance. My example is that Jews were taken to concentration camps for not doing anything wrong, but except for being Jews.
Intolerance, and my example is the Japanese were taken to labor camps just because they were the Japanese.
Okay, my example is intolerance. It's like, I like South Carolina and you like Clemson, so now I hate you.